So we're going to start by unboxing it. Number one, and we're going to go slowly through this to make it easy, okay? I want to make this as easy as we can, alright? For all of us. So, step one, align each foot, number one. So the feet are these black ones.
Ooh.
We're going to take the 2 feet. These are called foot number one. We're going to align each foot number one to the base. Step one, align each foot number one to the base with the arrow on the top of the foot, pointing toward outside of the base. So when we put these on the base, which is this, these arrows are going to be facing away from the base.
Just like that.
Screw each foot to the base using 2 number 2 screws. Insert 2 number 3 anti-slip plugs into the inside of the holes of the feet. So you can actually see that there's these little grooves on each side. And those line up with these little, if you can see it in the camera, the center here where this sticks up. So the way this is going to line up is these feet are going to go right in like that.
Are we gonna?
So read the step the first time to gather the parts you need for that step, then go back through, read it again in order to assemble it. So align each foot to the base with the arrow at the top pointing toward outside of the base. Screw each foot to the base using 2 number 2 screws. These have a thing showing you what the number 2 screws are. In this case, it doesn't, which is fine. The picture itself for step number 1 will be good enough. So there might only be one size screw. Yep, so see this middle piece section here where I got this board? By the way, this Workmate is very handy. I am putting in a video out on assembling and how to use this, so keep an eye out for that if I haven't already put it up.
I just dump them out.
Yep, so dump them on here. I put a piece of wood in here that's a little bit lower than this, so you can dump stuff right in the middle of it, kind of like a tool well, and it won't go anywhere. So I can dump all these in here. We're going to find the number 2 screws. So let's see how many different kinds of screws we have first.
1.
No, how many different kinds? Not how many. Okay, so there's one kind and there's 4 of those. There's another kind, there's only, looks like only 1 of those. This isn't a screw, that's a little, what do you have in your hand? You hiding stuff on us now? Alright, no hoarding. There's 2 little nuts, these 4 little rubber, looks like these are rubber feet. And then there's 1 knob, and we have an Allen wrench. The first thing it's asking for is these number 2 screws. We're going to need 4 of them. There's 4 screws here, so I would say those are the number 2 screws. They look like what's in the picture. So it's showing to screw these in from the bottom. So the best way to do this, I think, will be to flip it upside down. So the arrow is going to face this way. So we want to make sure the arrow is going to face this way. So we put this here so the screw holes line up and that notch is in there. And then you can put the screws in the screw hole. As I put it down, make sure it's lined up. So I'm going to at least get one side just snug. See these little rubber pegs? They go in this hole. Careful not to strip the screws. They are soft metal, so if you try to turn them too tight and they strip, if you ever want to take it apart, you're going to have a heck of a time doing it. Wrong hole.
Do we have to do something now?
Did you tighten those down?
Yeah.
You just double check. Okay.
There you go.
Alright. So that is step 1. Push it in.
Oh. That's what I thought, but then.
Alright.
Oh, then.
So in order to move this, apparently you push this knob in, move it around, let go, until it locks. Okay, anyway, so there's these 2 holes here on the other side. There are 2 here. They're not really holes, they're just notches. There should be 4 metal rods. Kyle's going to get the 4 metal rods. Alright, so we're going to insert these go in like that. Put another one in there and just let it sit like that one is.
Like that?
put the square nuts, we're just going to do one end at a time. Put the square nuts number 5 into the slots, which are in front of the guide rod slots, and then fasten the set screw number 6 into the square nut and tighten. So what they're saying is, it comes with these little things here, which are probably hard to see. And you're going to slide. It says to take the set screw off to do this. I don't think you have to, and you don't. You can slide the nut right down inside there. I'm going to do the other side. And I'll put a picture of what that looks like up on the screen because I know it might be hard to see from there. You can see in the picture the 2 little nuts are slid down in there, and you can see the set screws are inside of those nuts. Then it says fasten the set screw into the square nut and tighten. Comes with this little Allen wrench that says to tighten. In order to tighten, it's always easier to put the smaller end in and crank on the longer end. Gives you a little more leverage. So now that's in there nice and tight. I'll do the same thing on the other side. That keeps this from pulling up and out. Okay. This little screw, as you screw it out of this, see how it has a groove in the end of it?
Yeah.
This nut and screw is holding up against this. So I'll put a little picture of this on the screen so you can kind of see how it works and how it holds it in place. You can see that the cap screw screws through that square nut, and that cap screw comes out to the other side and slides into the groove on the bottom of that rod, holding the rod from pulling out. So then we want to tighten that pretty good, and then we're going to do the other side. Put one of the rods in there. Ryan, you put that rod in there.
Yeah. I was gonna say.
Just leave them. Okay, now Ryan can do this step. So it's basically going to do the same thing we just did on the front. Now we're going to do it on the back side. So with these cap screws, you can only fit the wrench into one side. So you'll know which side should be sticking out. And the side that should be sticking out is the side that, here, you want to make sure you push it down, very good. The side that's sticking out should be the side that you're able to put the wrench into. If you can't get the wrench into the hole on the end, you got it backwards and you want to take it out and turn it around. It's easier first to initially tighten it with the long end, and then once you're ready to tighten it way down, to the point where it's just starting to flex a little bit, don't bend it. And then make sure the rod doesn't come out. You're good.
It's good.
There we go. Now something's weird here. So I'm guessing I didn't make sure this rod was all the way down. So I would say, based on what we just experienced, when you're done putting these rods in, make sure they're even, because I believe they're supposed to be.
I think you're just going to push it in far enough. Yeah, it's the same height now.
Alright, well, I'll hold it down while you tighten it in. So definitely check to make sure these are
Even.
now you can see the top of these rods. So what I noticed is that the top of these rods on the front side were not even. So we went ahead and loosened it and pulled it out and put it back in, and now they're even. So you want to make sure that they're down all the way when you go to tighten. Step 3, insert 2 number 7 screws. Insert 2 number 7 screws and 2 number 8 nuts loosely into handles as shown. Into the handle. Get the saw handle. The handle number 10 is then placed into the slot of the blade assembly. This has been mentioned to me by somebody in our beginner woodworking Facebook group, is if when you're assembling this, be extremely careful because the blade is very sharp. We need to insert 2 number 7 screws, which there are only 2 screws left, so I'm just going to assume that the 2 screws that are left are the number 7 screws. They're black. Insert the 2 number 7 screws and 2 number 8 nuts loosely into the handle. You have the handle. There's 2 nuts and 2 screws. I'm going to put one side of the handle has round holes in it. The other side has ones that you can tell the nuts just slide right into.
Oh,
We're going to do one at a time. I'm going to put one nut into where that nut fits into and drop it in. And then I'm going to hold it with my finger, tip it over, and I'm going to run the bolt into that, and it just says turn it in just loosely. I'm just doing it with my thumb.
Yeah, because it has to go into these little notches.
Okay. Same thing with the other one. Flip it back over. I'm putting this nut in the handle.
Yeah, it's always.
Put my finger over that, hold it, flip it over, and screw the next bolt in. So the handle is going to go like this, and the far end that sticks out is going to be towards the bottom, because you can feel kind of naturally how the saw is going to work. With the blade on the low end, these bolts are now going to slide into these slots like this and down. So in and down. These holes here slide into these rods here, or these rods slide into those holes, I should say. So Ryan's just going to go ahead and do that now. So we're going to slide these down onto the holes. Now, can it go on either way, Ryan? No. Could this have gone the other way?
No, it has to go this way. Right.
So when you're doing this, to make sure that the handle end is towards the front of the miter box, that's the side where the measurements are for the different angles, and that's the side where the Stanley symbol is and the yellow knob or button. So the handle will be on that side. Now this is going to slide down over that. We're going to turn this around. Watch out. Don't want to cut anyone. I mean, I do, but not on camera. I don't want witnesses. Now we need to tighten the handle. So that's going to be simply just putting the end of the Allen wrench into the screw into the handle. The nut's going to be held in the other side of the handle on its own. So just crank that nice and tight. So we've tightened the handle down. It's pretty much completely finished. You can get a piece of wood over here, cut it. But there's one last step. And this is one step that the instructions aren't very clear on. And unfortunately, it takes a bit to kind of read through the instructions and figure out. But that's these pieces here. And I'll put a picture of this up on the screen so you can get a better look at what it looks like. This is a guide stop. So basically, or a depth stop. What this does is it stops this from dropping down all the way. So if you don't want to cut a piece of wood all the way through, but you only want to cut it partially, like just halfway through, if you're going to cut like a notch into something and you don't want to go all the way through, that's what these are going to do. You can set these up to a certain height and the saw will only cut so high. So I'm going to pull this, we're going to pull this saw assembly back off of the rods. I'm going to slide one on this corner rod here, and then what you're going to do is put the other one on the opposite corner rod here. Then we're going to slide these back on. So now this is going to sit on top of those stops, and it's actually not even sitting on top of the stops because it actually stops before it touches them. So you can just saw a piece of wood in half, or you can raise this up, lift the stop up, and it's just a hand screw with finger screw, thumb screw, whatever you want to call it. You just tighten it to the point where you can't tighten it anymore with your finger. Do the same thing to the other one. You're probably going to want to measure the height. I'm not sure. There's no ruler or anything on here that tells you how high this is. So you're going to need to do some sort of measuring. So you want to hold it up. Again, be careful the blade's sharp.
Yep, and they're also going to want to make sure if they're kind of making sure that the blade is straight too.
Right. So if you want a straight cut, you want your blade straight. If you don't want a straight cut, you put it at whatever angle you want. So you'll have to do some things to measure the angle that you want, or if you want it to be perfectly straight, you're going to want to take some sort of measurement to make sure you get it at the height you want. So there's going to be a little bit of figuring out there. So now you can see I can still cut up this high. So I'm only going to cut partially down into a piece of wood. So I'm going to grab a piece of wood to show you what I mean by that. Here's just a scrap piece of wood we'll put in here, and so I'll show you. You want to hold it with your hand, because as you go back and forth you can pull it right out. So you want to hold this with your hand. And this cuts on the push.
You're almost done.
Yep, so now it's not cutting anymore because of the stops. So if I lift this up and pull the saw out, I didn't cut all the way through. The piece of wood's still together because those stops stop me from cutting all the way through it. Now, if I loosen those stops and drop them all the way down, and I put that wood back in, I'll just go right into the same slot so I don't have to watch me cut through half a piece of wood again. If this looks like it's hard to cut, it's only because this wood is green, it's wet. Cutting through wet wood is going to be a little bit harder to do. So then now if I keep cutting, now it's going to keep cutting through the wood. Now it's dropped down, the saw is free. Now we cut it all the way through. So if you put the stops all the way down, the saw will cut completely through your piece of wood. If you want to cut an angle, so it's the same thing I just showed you, except you're going to push this button in. You can't see the button, but oh yeah, there you go. This little button here, you're just going to push it in, and you can turn this around and cut it any angle you want. And again, having your hand here, just be careful of the blades here. It is sharp.
It also says the measurement right there.
Yep, so right on here,
Or what they
if you get the sawdust off here, there's a line, an arrow that's pointing right at whatever degree the cut's going to be, and it'll show you exactly where to cut. So I'll take a picture of the stops too. So I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to lift this up here. I'm going to tighten the stop here. I'm going to tighten the back stop up roughly in the same spot. So now say you wanted to cut a piece this high up, I would lift it that up, high up. I'll take a picture and I'll put that up on the screen here so you can see. You can see when it's sitting on it and when it's not sitting on it.
Well, if you push this all the way back, you can use this without getting cut by the saw.
That's smart, right?
Because if it's out here, you could like bring your finger up and get yourself cut on it. If you push it back, you're only a little bit of the saw is there, and you can like have your finger off to the side like more because it's not like in the way.
So Ryan made a smart observation when I was doing this. If you want to avoid having your fingers near the blade, have the saw pushed all the way in, then you can push this button without any risk of getting cut. That's actually smart. I should have noticed that. Good job, Ryan. To show you a couple other things that they might be in the directions, but I am too patient and didn't, or too impatient and didn't take the time to read, but so now going back and looking at the instructions, let's say you place a piece of wood in here you want to cut. Well, when you go to pull on the saw, I'm going to drop these stops down. We know what these stops do. You place the piece of wood in the saw, and you pull back, it's going to move the whole piece of wood around, right? So Ryan, let me see, Kyle, let me see one of those yellow things.
Oh. I'll take it out of the
Where's that metal? Let me see that metal rod too. You can get the yellow things out while I do this. The knob goes in the end where your stop's going to be, and you can go on either side with this. You can slide it in from either side and it'll work. So what this knob's going to do is keep this stop from moving around. It will stop the stop. So you'll tighten it until this stops moving. Then you just hold it in the position you want it in. So if you know you want to cut this, say, you know, right there, you know that's where your line is. Line this up with that, hold it in place, and tighten that little knob underneath. And that will now stay in this position, so every time you put a piece of wood in here, you'll cut it to the same length every time. So if you need 4 legs, say for instance for a small little stand or table, they'll cut that leg at the same length every cut. So that's how the stop works. And now Kyle is going to hand me the yellow pegs.
Here.
So there's also these yellow pegs. And if you put the pegs, so you can see all these holes here in the top. There's a bunch of holes. If you stick the peg in that hole, like this, now the wood can't go back. And you put one on the other side also.
Yeah. They look like mini mustard bottles.
So you put the mini mustard bottles in each side, and now you see when I go to pull back, the wood's not able to go anywhere. It can't go this way. So if we wanted to cut it this long, now the piece of wood can't go very far. So if you weren't holding it good enough and it slipped, or I could put it over here, and that will probably even hold it a little better. Yeah, see? Now I don't even have to hold the piece of wood, it'll stay right where I want it to. So between this end stop and these little pegs, these pieces hold the wood in place. That is pretty much how this whole thing works, and that's pretty much the gist of it. If you have any trouble with moving the saw back and forth when you're cutting into the wood, especially a green piece of wood like this, or pine especially, you could have trouble. You can put a little bit of oil on the side of the blade. So you can see the side of the blade here. You can go ahead and put some oil on here, 3-in-1 oil, WD-40. You can put some paste wax on here, and that will keep this side of this saw slick rather than sticky, so it's not sticking to the wood. And that will make sawing a lot easier. And I assume, I haven't looked into, but this blade looks like it's replaceable. So they say the blade will last quite a while because it's pretty hard and sharp to begin with, but it looks like they are replaceable. So I would say I'd be willing to bet that you can probably go online and find these, and I will look to see if I can find those, and I will put a link to that in the description below in this video, as well as a link to where you can find this saw. Alright, well, so that's the introduction on how to unbox and assemble the Stanley 2800 miter saw with miter box, and how to use it. And like I said, it also makes a great combination along with the Black & Decker Workmate Project Center and Vice. So I'll put a link to both of those down in the description below, and like I said, I'll also see if I can find a link to the spare blades for this saw, and also maybe a link to where you can get more of the little dogs to hold those in place on the Workmate, which you can get a spare pack of these. I think they come in 4 packs. So alright, so that's going to be it. Thank you as usual for watching, really appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about anything in our shop or sawmill or anything else that you see us doing on the channel, definitely put those down in the comments below. If you have used or have one of these miter boxes and saw combinations, please comment down below and let us know what you think of it and what sort of things you've built and done with it that you like. And if you dislike it, let us know, and what it is that you don't like about it. And so everyone else can read down in the comments and learn from each other. So I appreciate it. Thanks again. Talk to you soon. Take care. Happy woodworking.